They called the Titanic unsinkable, but the night of 1912 never signed that agreement. In the dark, a touch of ice spoke to steel. Within centimeters, fate changed. Want to see exactly where the strength gave way and why? Subscribe and turn on notifications now. The next few seconds change the story. The Titanic runs on coordinated routine. Heat in the boilers, elegant quiet in the salons, lookouts sweeping the night. Between these worlds, steel speaks with water. The structure is strong, but the joints keep secrets. Before meeting the ice, let's study the ship's skin, where each rivet decides how long it takes for the sea to send word. If we understand the hull now, we'll understand the minutes to come. In cold water, steel turns stiffer and concentrates stress. The collision doesn't open a clean gash. It stitches small openings along the seams. If we trace where the pressure traveled, we'll see what eyes on board could not. Engineering rebuilds the night. Plates, rivets, compartments, and time running inside the hull. The sea looks like glass, and that deceives the eyes. The ice warnings exist, but the night offers no easy clues. A decision made in seconds has to move thousands of tons against the water's inertia. Between the helm and the bow lies a corridor of time that's too short. Here is where engineering and instinct meet, and sometimes miss each other. The warning runs along the wires and fades into the noise of routine. The ship carries on vast, disciplined, confident. When ice touches, there will be no bugle, only a brushing sound the deck barely notices. But the hull understands. What decides the night is inside. Doors, plates, rivets, and minutes whose value is changing. If we track the pressure, we'll see water's path before it's seen. The collision doesn't arrive like a roar, but as a prolonged scrape. On the bridge, seconds weigh tons. In the hull, force seeks the seams. Rivets hold plates. Plates defend compartments. If the contact lasts long enough, the water will find the plural. Not one cut, but many beginnings. Water entered, first as sound, then as weight. Doors drop, men sprint, and the cold touches metal from within. Each valve closed buys minutes. Each minute changes the deck's angle. The hull speaks differently now. The bow calls, the stern answers. If we measure trim and waterline, we'll watch the future coming down the corridor. Evacuation begins before the mind accepts it. Boats sway, falls sing, and the deck still seems far too safe. Discipline buys time, but physics collects everything. While arms work in the cold, the structure bends within. If we read the stresses amidships, we'll see what each lifeboat means in minutes of ship. Gravity takes sides. The bow settles. The stern breathes a little higher. The ship's sound changes. Less porcelain, more metal under strain. Each boat lowered buys silence for those still waiting. But below, the structure curves. Tension travels along the deck like a lit wire. If we read the forces amidships, we'll see the omen of what's coming. Messages race through the ether while water races through the holds. The radio asks for help. The pumps ask for time. Stability is a number changing with every centimeter of water that enters. If we compare the sea's inflow to the pump's breath, we'll see the curve already points downward. It's cold mathematics. When the sum closes, the deck tilts. The boats go down, but the clock doesn't go with them. Each minute, the bow gives one more step, and the deck learns a new angle. Capacity exists. Time doesn't always. And loading below potential charges, interest to the future. If this line of reasoning helps you see the night clearly, stay with me to the end. We'll measure cause and effect without losing anyone from the frame. The bow drops another notch, and the water learns new routes. Pumps work, but the Atlantic has deeper lungs. Each joint that yields adds centimeters to the waterline and minutes to the final tally. On board, effort is muscle. In the structure, it's cold arithmetic. If we compare inflow and outflow, we'll hear the ship already speaking in the past tense. The cold isn't scenery, it's an agent. Water steals heat as if it could count time in bones. On deck, music holds fear. In the sea, the body measures minutes, not hours. Life jackets support mass, but not temperature. If we understand the curve of cold, we'll understand why silence arrived so quickly. Deep in the ship, the path isn't a straight line. Doors, grates, and level changes turn into extra minutes on the water's clock. Some steps cost courage, others authorization that never comes. If we map each turn and corridor, we'll see how time leaked through design decisions. The Atlantic came in fast. People, not always. Light is time converted into current. As the bow settles, the generators support the ship as best they can. Cables feed power to pumps and lamps, but the water steals redundancies. In the growing dark, every watt is a choice. If we follow the electricity's path, we'll see where Titanic gained minutes and where they ended. When water comes in, it doesn't just weigh, it moves. In the holds, the free surface runs and pushes the ship where gravity commands. Objects slide, steps change height. The body learns a different balance. Stability disappears this way, not at once, but with each oscillation. If we see the loose liquid within, we'll understand why the deck stopped being a floor. The collapsible boats promise places when the places run out. But launching under list means working against gravity and wind. Rope, block, and tackle, and wood become a sensitive equation. If the angle passes the point, the margin vanishes. If we measure the load on the falls and the path of the davits, we'll see how each lowering bought exact minutes of life. The structure begins to speak louder than the music. With the bow weighing the Atlantic, amidships feels the crack from within. Hogging yields to sagging. The deck curves like an arch, forgetting how to be a bridge. Stays vibrate. Plates breathe. Rivets test their own heads. If we read the effort where the ship breaks in two tempos, we'll see the line where the steel chooses to yield. With every minute, the ship's curve learns a new limit. The bow pulls, the stern resists, and amidships does the math in silence. Failures don't start large. They're born at edges, seams, and rivet holes where stress concentrates. When the deck turns into a trail of strain, the fracture needs only an invitation. Let's watch where the line lights up and how it finds its path. The ship enters the boundary where sound turns into rupture. The bow bears the Atlantic's weight. The stern tries to keep the world horizontal for one more moment. Cables sing, plates arch, and the fracture line searches for air. When the first funnel gives way, it won't be just metal falling. It will confirm the night has broken the hull from within. Look to amidships. That's where history draws the tear. The bow weighs more than the deck can hold. The strain runs along the ship's spine like fire beneath paint. The instant the fracture meets air, kinematics decides. The front dives. The rear hesitates. If this reasoning helps you hear what the metal is saying, stay with me. We'll follow the separation, frame by frame, to the last motion. For seconds, they are two ships. At the bottom, it's one fate. Let's read this final gesture in metal and water. With the bow lost, the stern rises as if trying to breathe. The propellers clear the water, and the deck learns an angle no one can walk. In the hull, plates beg for truce. On deck, gravity demands short decisions. It's the structure's last breath. The metal still holds, but only for moments. If we listen to the stays and read the ship's back, we'll see the curve that precedes the final plunge. The stern hesitates aloft, and for a moment, the world seems to hold its breath. Then weight beats air. The hull yields, the deck disappears into vertical, and the sea takes what remains. Bubbles, steam, and darkness. Physics closes the account. The motion is inevitable. What rose to see the sky now descends to the deep. Let's read that fall in metal and sea. After the noise, the Atlantic goes back to whispering. In the boats, the cold turns each minute into an enemy, and the night measures distance with weak lanterns. Between planks and silence, the debris field sketches a map only daylight will read. The engineering continues. Now, to locate, measure, understand the trail left on the bottom. On the cold horizon, a hull answers. The Carpathia cuts the night toward scattered lights. Aboard the boats, time has turned into temperature, and temperature decides who can still climb a ladder. Rescue is the sum of minutes, miles, and steady hands in ice. If we read the distance covered and the thermal window, we'll see how arrival turned silence into breath. After the water came the questions, and the answers changed ships. Boats stopped being aesthetic concessions and became obligatory arithmetic. Routes began to heed ice with eyes and with radio. Patrols were born to watch what the night hides. In steel and rivets, quality became baseline, not a gamble. If we follow these corrections, we'll see that Titanic kept sailing as a lesson, not a ghost. The sea kept the ship, but it didn't smother its answers. Between steel, rivets, and minutes, the night drew a clear sequence: contact, flooding, loss of stability, rupture, and fall. Today, when we see bow and stern sleeping far apart, we understand that Unsinkable was only a human promise, and water, a patient reminder. What we learned remains: Design for the unexpected, train for the impossible, respect the sea's timing.